Hi, welcome to Medical Astrology Class 14, Secrets of Death. Today's lesson is actually kind of a spiritual lesson. You know, all astrology is very spiritual, and my roots are extremely kind of spiritual. And ultimately, we want to bring back astrology to spirituality because that's its essence. And that gets to be the difference between the 8th and the 9th house. I mean, if you get a dark 8th house, it gets rather, you know, you can have astrologers that are rather dark and they have a dark 8th house and they don't have strong spirituality, but Vedic astrology really kind of can go into the 9th house of higher wisdom, and it should move us toward knowledge of the self and knowledge of transcending the difficulties in our world, and then it becomes higher wisdom in the 9th house. So you have to remember that. And today's lesson is kind of moving astrology into the 9th house for us. Let's start with some Vedic chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakratunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samaprabha, Nirvigyam Karame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavatitam Ma Bhivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Somaye Mangulai Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukrashani Vischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Okay, honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, Holy Tradition of Masters, all my great teachers. Jasmine is here. Kathy's here. Pinar said she was coming late. Carmen, I think, is traveling this weekend. Patricia, I haven't heard from. Kathy, I have not heard from. It's unusual that I don't hear from her. Affy's here, Aparna's here. Kanan said she couldn't come today, and Sundari's here, and Danny's here. You sent me a new picture, Danny, and I put it in the other computer, so I'll get it on this one eventually. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
And Deanna's here. Okay, great. And Ellen usually watches tapes. Okay, so where are we? So Medical Astrology 2 will start September 13th, and again, the early bird for it is this weekend. And if you need any payment plans, let me know. It's just, you can still get the early bird price with the payment program. If you need something like that, it's just good for me to know about my registrations. I know in the age of COVID, everything's up in the air, but whatever you can do would be great. I did make a commitment to do it, and it's, all new lessons again for me, but I've been enjoying it so much. Foundations 3, which is, is actually going to have a lot of new material for even if you haven't taken my other foundation classes. There's a lot of good material in Foundations 3, and I'll send you some material on it. And Financial Astrology 2, which is going to be a little bit more on mundane astrology and investment astrology, and some other fun things that I left out of part 1, and that's going to start Saturday, September 12th. I just connected with Dennis Harness. The Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference this year will be virtual, and Dennis was really kind of holding out, hoping that COVID would go away, but he's finally realizing that the conference has to be virtual this year. And that's good news because a lot of you, it's very expensive to travel to Sedona and get a hotel, and it's always wonderful to meet people in person. Affy was there last year, and Carmen was there last year. It's always wonderful to meet people live at these conferences, but many of you are all over the world, and it's expensive to go to these conferences. So it'll be offered online this year, and I'll be speaking on financial astrology this year. And the dates on that are November 19th to the 23rd. He said we'll do it live again in 2021. Okay. So as I was saying earlier, for those of you who came a little bit late, today's lesson is kind of a spiritual lesson. And I said all of astrology really is about our spirituality and should take us, astrology really should be there to kind of move you beyond fear, because we all have this kind of fear of the future, and we have, we always are trying to prevent the danger that hasn't come, and we all want to understand what's going on in our lives so we can transcend the planets. If you know my work, you've read my books, the planets affect us emotionally and psychologically mostly. And if we understand the impact on the emotions and the psychology, then we can, move beyond it. And I always say, Saturn, you can go away, and you can, because if if you're a higher being and you meditate a lot, you can really go deeply into, understanding what's going on and move beyond it rather than just be gripped and victimized. Anyway, I stand on the shoulders of many great teachers for this lesson. Special thanks to my Guru Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who did a commentary on the Katha Upanishad and another videotape called Death and Beyond. I originally, when they were building a center in Los Angeles and trying to raise money, he did this these lessons live, and they were kind of riveting when I was there. And people donated $1,100 to $1,200 because they were trying to build a center there. And it was very, very special knowledge that he gave out at that time. And because I was there, I was able to share it with you. The principle of Guru Dakshina, it would be great if you feel inclined to or have the money to donate a few dollars to his charity is www.iahv.org. I donate regularly, but I'm kind of donating for you, but I think it would just be nice, nature of this lesson, to kind of honor him. And there's all kinds of wonderful, they have projects like Welcome Home Troops and projects to teach meditation in the schools, and they have all kinds of wonderful charities. And you'll see it does really good work. And his books are also on Amazon.com. So in today's lesson, it's a spiritual one. So again, next week we'll do longevity. I have been working on trying to find something that would be simple, and I said longevity is probably the most complex topic in Vedic astrology, and Sanjay Roth's, all of his second year is devoted to studying it and all these kind of odd things about it. And but I did find some material. I'm trying to synthesize it so that you get an idea, but it's a very, very complex subject. And again, so it's really kind of a summary lesson next week, but I will get it to you probably late because it's going to take me a while to put together. Okay, so let's talk about death. And the whole purpose of this lesson is that we have to kind of transcend our fear of death, because there is no such thing as death. That's if you only believe that we have a material body and we're here once, then the fear of COVID and death can really kind of overwhelm you, and the fear of pain and suffering can kind of really overwhelm you. But you have to kind of get that we recycle just like nature recycles. The leaves come every spring. They turn to golden brown and they fall off, and the trees bare, and then they recycle again in the spring. And we recycle, nature recycles, and we have a continuum to live, and we have to do the best job we can every lifetime, and make sure we don't repeat past mistakes. But if you want to know what death is like, when we die, we die every day when we go to sleep. Where do we go? I mean, we sometimes have awareness in the dream state, but we just kind of go. And there's this kind of thing that the last thing that we think about before we go to sleep is often the first thing that we remember when we wake up. Watch that, because it's kind of fascinating. And I do notice that sometimes I'm like thinking about something, and when I first wake up, I'm thinking about that again. It's kind of eerie if you learn to watch that and notice that. So death is like sleep, and that's why the last thought when we die is very important, because it can create the primal desires for the next life. So it's just good to be aware. And I was just reading today another book, a beautiful book on death of holy people, and Gandhi, when he was assassinated, which was a very sudden thing, when he didn't have much time to think about his last thought, but he screamed out, Shri Ram, Shri Ram, Shri Ram, because he's a very Ram devotee. So it's very important, to remember that. People sometimes can't deal with this incarnation and they commit suicide, and they're in anguish and agony, and then they're still reborn with that same energy. So you can't escape your karma. You have to transform it, and you have to counsel people. Sometimes you meet people where, I can't go on anymore, I'm thinking of committing suicide, get them to the suicide hotline, but it really is kind of one of the most difficult things that can happen to a soul. So you have to see that life is a game, and that when you live life fully, then you can embrace death fully with no fear and be part of the continuum. And we need to remember to drop every regret from the past and live in the present moment and see the past as a dream. And then you're dying every moment and are renewed. So sometimes, the secret of death is also the secret of life. We have to kind of let go of the past, and as astrologers, we're obsessed with the past and the future, aren't we? and but then we miss the present moment, right? And life exists in the present moment. Do you go when you go for a walk in nature? Are you thinking about what your father did to you 20 years ago? Are you worried about what's going to happen to your children? Or are you just there enjoying the beauty of the leaves and the breeze and the butterflies and the birds? I mean, training the mind to live in the present moment is an art, and that's certainly what we teach in our classes. But and it happens naturally through meditation and breath work. The more you do spiritual practice, the more you're able to live in the present moment, and then you can let go of the past. Something happens, you meet people sometimes, they something terrible happens to them, and like 6 weeks later they're still talking about it. And then you meet some people that they're not like that, they're not repeating or reliving the past. So we have to kind of die to every moment. I remember I was driving to Phoenix when we were in Arizona, and somebody, I'm sure all had this experience where somebody passes you just so closely that you almost crash, and it was very jarring in the moment. But because of all these years of meditation, I was able to drop it rather quickly. And most people would be talking about it, for weeks and like, but the point is that whether good things happen or negative things happen, we have to kind of die and let them go to the moment and just be into the moment, I love this phrase. There's, some people have this desire to, live to be really old, and there's certain movements about having an immortal body, and there's stories of saints that have lived 400 years and things like that. But nature is always rebaking new cookies, as I remember Sri once saying. It's kind of, I told you the story about the leaves, but it's also like, if you have an old box of cookies that you've had on the shelf for 2 years, they just aren't very good. So it's good to make a new box of cookies periodically. And so nature kind of recycles us, and it's a good thing. So if you're afraid to go to bed at night, you may be afraid, are you afraid that you won't wake up? Are you afraid of death? It's the same thing. And people have trouble sleeping. You have to wonder, especially in the COVID outbreak, you have to kind of think, are they afraid of dying? And they're worried, And the only way you get beyond worry about death is to have some experience of your eternal nature in meditation, or to read and watch the videotapes of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. How many people have read or studied Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? You know about her?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
I have.
Yeah. So good. She's very inspiring because she interviewed all these people that kind of died on operating tables or had this near-death experience, and she recorded what happened to them. And they're very beautiful stories. Like people had these tunnel of lights they went to, and they were flashed back all the wonderful things they did in their life. So it was like, there's this whole story about how your life flashes before you when you die. It's like this movie plays of your life. But I remember this beautiful story about this one woman. She said she remembers that her movie was only about the times that she shared love and gave compassion. And it wasn't like, she was shown all the terrible things that happened in her life. She was only shown when her life flashed before her, she was shown all the beautiful moments when she gave love and compassion. She told the story about, I think she was 8 or 10 years old in an overnight camp, and there was a woman in a wheelchair, and the woman was all alone, and they were kind of going to leave her all alone. The counselors were going to leave her all alone there in the cabin while everybody went on some canoe trip or overnight trip. And this woman volunteered just to stay with this woman and to keep her company. And that was one of the things she remembered when she was on the deathbed. So it was interesting because it's a reminder, what's important in our life. What are we going to be remembered for? How much love and compassion we give to others, how much kindness we give, not how much political fighting we do, not what our belief system is, but how much love and kindness we give to others. It's a kind of a real wake-up call. So in meditation, we can get a glimpse of our eternal nature, and that can move us beyond death. I mean, those of you who had mystical experiences in meditation, you have this sense of timelessness, and you realize that you're much bigger than your body. And when you have that, you can kind of, remember that and not be scared of death. So I told you about the last thought. So the last thought that you have is important because it will show how you reincarnate. And most people, people die in different circumstances. I mean, some people die in comas, some people die, suddenly in an accident, like we saw Billy Martin going over the cliff yesterday. The question is, what do you think of while you're dying? I guess you have a few moments to think about it. And I think you just have to kind of, if you get into that situation, you just have to kind of think of, what you want. You think of a holy person, think of your guru, think of, someone that you love. And there's a very classical story about the saint. We don't usually come back. We don't come back as animals, although some people kind of think that. But one of my spiritual teachers used to say there's like 750 lives that you go through before you get to the spiritual lives, and the last 7 or 8 lives are your spiritual lives, and the last one you get enlightened and liberated. But so it's very unusual to go backwards and become an animal. But there's this one classic story in the Vedic text of the saint who had this pet deer, and he was so in love with this pet deer that he kept thinking about his deer as he was dying, and it was like one of the few cases in the recorded history where he came back as a deer. So but anyway, it's kind of a fascinating thing. So it's important to focus on. And that's why even if you have loved ones that are dying, play sacred music around them, like candles, create a sacred environment for them, so that there's a lot of holiness around them. Make sure, particularly people dying in hospital rooms, there's a lot of garbage in those hospital rooms. Just get it as pure as possible, playing a lot of sacred music and things like that. So when you leave your body, your mind encapsulates itself into the impression like a balloon. It remains hidden for a time until another body comes. So it's like, we'll talk about this in a minute. The whole body kind of condenses into this balloon of your mental body and your spiritual bodies, and it kind of leaves your physical body. So it's often thought, this was a kind of a funny story, sometimes people, their last thought is what they're most afraid of, and then they kind of reincarnate in that way. So mice are always afraid of cats. So it's often thought that mice reincarnate as cats, or that, the snake's only fear is the mongoose. So a snake, could reincarnate as a mongoose. So your strongest impression will manifest at death. So when death approaches, do something good and desire for our wonderful future human birth. I was watching, I've been watching this British TV series. I like these medical shows, as you can tell. Holby City, it's a British series. It's got 22 seasons, but and one of the main characters is actually dying in the last episode that they showed, and her ex-husband appears to her and gives her some advice, and not to carry anger into your death or regret, and she has this beautiful vision, and she gives this beautiful speech in front of all her colleagues who are kind of mourning because she's dying, and she just has this whole beautiful attitude about please get along with each other and love each other, life is too precious. So it's really kind of important to have kind of a wonderful attitude. And when you're in pain and you're suffering, it's hard. And so if you're comforting those around you, somehow you help them do that. And if not, if you can remember, that's something nice to do. Be grateful for all of those around you and encourage them to be loving and joyous. That was kind of thing. Shed tears of joy and love. So it's difficult because people die under different circumstances and they have different karma, and but like I said, even Gandhi, as he was shot, was thinking of Rama because he only had moments, but he knew that. Death should be a celebration at funerals, even if there's natural grief that wells up. In India, they have professional mourners, and you hire a professional mourner when you have a loved one die, and they come and they cry with you for 10 days, and the 11th day you celebrate. It is good to grieve after death, and if you can actually, I think this Indian tradition is kind of nice because you get it out of your system quickly, and then you don't carry it around. I mean, some people grieve for 5-10 years, or they never get over it, and again, it's clinging to the past, and because of the bonds of love, we can't help that. But it really sometimes, many people's lives are kind of ruined when a loved one dies, and because it's clinging on to something that happened in the past. And so, I think this tradition in India is that you let it all out and you move on. And when my mother died, I was doing a lot of healing work, and so I had a lot of healers work on me, and I went through it quickly. But I wonder though if I didn't kind of grieve enough. In the Jewish tradition, a family sits Shiva, and they people come visit them and feed them and try to support them, and that whole tradition, which is very beautiful. And at the same time, I kind of rejected my Jewish tradition. I didn't go off and spend time with my family. And I don't know, I have a problem because I have this whole idea that death should be celebrated and not caught up in sorrow. But I think the Vedic tradition tells us both are important. We kind of have to let the grief out, and then we also have to celebrate the life. In the community that I live in, they have these wonderful funerals, and you've been to them, where people get up and tell stories about how wonderful these people were. And I always find funerals as wonderful as weddings for that reason, because it's honoring people's lives. I think it's important to do that. So you have to kind of, you have to experience eternity in your meditation or in mystical experience to move beyond death. And then, you see that the formless is ruling your life, and that you are the part of the very universe, and you dissolve into the very universe. So it's not, you're never losing anything. you know. So we talked about this already. If you live in the moment with joy and do everything 100%, there are no regrets when you leave. And I think, I mean, that's the whole problem with life. You know, we have this thing. I didn't have time to do this. I didn't have time to do that. You know, it's very interesting. I was reading an article about they were interviewing terminally ill patients, and they were asking them about what they wish they had done differently. And most of them said, you know, like, I wish I had worked less. I wish I had spent more time with my family. I wish I had more fun. And you know, I wish I had more time to do things for other people. So, you know, these are kind of really beautiful things to kind of remember, and great wisdom that we live in the moment with joy and do everything 100%, and then there's no regrets when we leave, you know. And ultimately, you know, I think you see this in older people, and I can see this with my dad. He's kind of like a little child now as the dementia sets in, and you know, and he's a little bit moving toward joyfulness, you know. So we ultimately have to get back to that joyful, enthusiastic child, and then death can be totally enthusiastic. And you see some people die that way sometimes. I mean, there are people that go out. I mean, I was reading, listening to the radio on the BBC, had the story about this 92-year-old woman who went on the German equivalent of The Voice, you know, and I guess she had always wanted to be a singer. At 92, she kind of embraced that and just did it, and she became this huge hit on TV. You know, this 92-year-old woman became this rock star and singer, and you know, it's so kind of beautiful to see that happening, because you know, she didn't say, oh, I'm too old to do that, or I'm too frail to do that. Oh, nobody will like me. You know, she just kind of did it. So I think it's kind of beautiful and inspiration to meet people like that. And you sometimes when you meet older people like that, I mean, I live in a community that has a lot of seniors now. I mean, I'm part of that. I'm a senior. I'm starting to become a senior at 65. And even my mentor senior people, I've always, you know, the ones that you know, I'm always amazed that a lot of them are able to transcend their body and their pain and still be loving and giving. And I think it's something we all, you know, need to aspire to. You know, as we grow old, we lose life and we're slow in death. You know, people start hunching over, they stop breathing, there's no enthusiasm. If you get too caught up in the intellect, there's no life, we're dry and we start to feel less. So it's important, I think, to, you know, this is why, you know, I teach breath work, and you know, you have to kind of learn to enjoy the joy of the present moment and the little things that happen in life. And if you get too caught up in the intellect, you know, there's no life. So we have to kind of, you know, in astrology, we get very caught up in the intellect, including myself, and we have to kind of balance it out. I mean, I have my little dogs, and you know, I can't be intellectual with them, and I just hug them and play with them, and they move me out of my intellect into my heart. And we all have to have kind of an outlook like that, otherwise we get out of balance. So when you meditate, you go into the void, and it's like dying, and you clean the slate and you come out again. So like, again, die every moment in meditation. You know, let go of regrets, let go of the past, let go of that bad day you had. You know, you sleep it off. I mean, don't, even when you wake up the next day, I mean, one of my spiritual teachers used to say, you know, when you go to bed, be grateful for all the wonderful things that happen, and just offer all the terrible things that happened, you know, so you don't want to wake up with them the next day and hold on to them and keep reliving them for the next week or two or three or four. So it's really kind of powerful. Okay. Anybody want to share anything? I've got much more, but I just.
I would like to share a couple of things. It's Natalia.
Hi, Natalia.
Hi. I like how you told the story about this saint who was reborn as a deer. And so I remember the story, and actually it's interesting that he was born as a deer, but he also had like he had the ability to remember his past life, even as a deer.
Right. Yeah, I remember that part of it. Yes, yes.
It was very
Go ahead.
special. And
That was-
also, yeah, and also I just wanted to share one very interesting experience as you're talking. I just remembered when I lived in monastery, we've been traveling, and there was one family, and the young man was actually dying. And I was talking to him. I was kind of helping him, and I don't remember after he left, after he died, or before. I saw a very interesting dream. It was like meditative dream, and in that dream, I was like walking like in the middle of the forest, and the trees were towards right and towards left. So only I was able to go straight front. And in my dream, I saw the gates on a distance, and I could not understand how far is that, but I knew that this is death in my dream. And by knowing that I'm slowly approaching there, I was not scared by the fact of the death, but in that dream, I realized that I'm slowly approaching to those gates. And what worried me then, that whatever I need to accomplish is not so much enough time. It was really interesting. Still remember that.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to share anything?
Hi, it's Jasmine here.
Hey, Jasmine.
So we know that by the time of death, if we are remembering God or if you're chanting any sacred names of God, so it just helps us to go to upper lokas, higher lokas.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily happen if we don't really spend our life practicing that.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, you can't just kind of have a sinful life and then the last minute remember God and expect that you're going to, go to kind of a higher plane. Yeah, you obviously have to live that life, and you can actually sometimes the 12th house, if it has a lot of dignity and a lot of benefics in it, will kind of be one way of seeing what kind of loka that you go to. And so you want, you certainly want, I think when I've looked mine up, I always have Shiva, because I've got, but anyway, it's kind of like, that it is kind of, kind of fascinating. But yeah, that's a beautiful point, Jasmine. Thank you. Go
Barry,
ahead. Yeah.
Barry, excuse
Yes,
me.
Kathy.
I've had the unique opportunity to sit with a lot of mediums and hear a lot of people communicating from death,
Right.
and many people often have regrets, and they're always saying, "I'm sorry I wasn't around as much when you were a child," or "I'm sorry for this." So there's a deep sense of regret with some people for the way they behaved or acted, and so it's better to resolve all those issues before you die, because you do take it with you, the regret and the sadness that you didn't do things right.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed it over and over by hearing all these readings.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I did mention that before too. It's kind of like, we actually have to die to every moment. When we go to sleep, we have to let go of the previous day. And yeah, if you have unfinished karma with loved ones, children, particularly family members, you've got to kind of resolve it. And when I do readings for people, I'm always kind of, I'm starting to get these people who are asking, they're 70 and, they don't think they have too much more longer to live, and they're trying to figure out what they need to do with the rest of their life. And, you can kind of see it in the chart in the Atmakarika, Jupiter Atmakarika, it's kind of, we learn Jupiter Atmakarika, it can be husbands and children. And Jupiter Atmakarika, it's, the Atmakarika always has like lessons of this incarnation. And so if you haven't completed, lessons, if you have regrets around past husbands or even if they're gone, you have to do these healing exercises. And your children, you certainly don't want to leave, being in a mess with your kids, because then, what happens with family karma is, people die and they think of their kids, and they reincarnate into their kids' families, and they become the grandfather, they become the kid, in the family. And so this way we have all this kind of like family karma that gets worked out, because people's last thoughts are often about my family, which is fine. But it keeps binding us to this kind of ancestral karma things that we have to work out. So yeah, clean it up as much as you can before you leave, because otherwise you end up like working it out in the next lifetime.
Hey, Barry.
Yeah.
This is Aparna. It's not related to this, but maybe it is. Earlier, like maybe 3 months ago, a friend of mine's son committed suicide. And he was my student. I teach Hinduism at our temple here.
Yeah.
And he was my student for about 3-4 years. Excellent student, no sign of depression, nothing. This just happened right when COVID hit. And then I went to his house to meet the parents, along with social distancing and everything. After I came back, so March, April, May, June, I had been struggling, and maybe I still am, but I was struggling with this energy block in my heart chakra and my Manipur chakra, the 2 chakras, right? It was just, I couldn't breathe. I had to go to the medical doctor, did an EKG, made sure everything was okay. And I went to my acupuncturist to clear, and I tried doing chakra healing myself. And a friend of mine who does some energy work, she and I did a session, and she said that I had the energy logged in me from this kid, and he had a message. And the message was of regret. He regretted doing what he did. And I cannot explain this, but I had been working with the family, because they're also co-teachers with me. And I just told them that, because they wanted, when they did the asti, the final, ashes, they went to the ocean. And I just told them, can you please just say it out loud that you forgive him, even though they didn't think that it was his fault or anything. And they did that. And I felt that energy release so strongly.
Wow.
And it's something that you can't wrap your head around. And I cannot discard all the data, because I'm a data person. I cannot discard all the data that's in front of me, with the medical doctors, with my acupuncturist, with the energy person. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's subtle body, causal body, something got lodged. And maybe when he committed suicide, he was probably so much in the grip of those energies, and he did what he did. And maybe his last thought was, oh my God, I shouldn't have done it. Or I don't know. I have no explanation, but like living in the past and getting stuck there, I felt like I experienced someone else's energy being stuck in me, because I was so open, or I had that connection with that kid.
Yeah,
I can't explain.
It can happen. I know there is there's a wonderful woman in our community. She was a new mother, and everybody loved her. She was a dancer, and she was put on some medication. She had been attacked by some stray dogs when she had gone for a walk, and it traumatized her, and they put her on this medication, and the medication was so strong, it says, stop taking the medication if you feel suicidal. But she got gripped and by the energies from this medication, and she wandered onto the railroad tracks, and just and the whole community was just shocked, because everybody loved her, and it was like we were grieving her soul. And we even have her Facebook site still up from 7 years ago, because everybody still misses her, but it's like that. It's just sometimes big souls too have this impression on us, and we have this kind of group soul with them. But you know, it's very tragic. We'll talk a little bit more about suicide later. So remember, go ahead. Yeah.
I also have some information regarding death that might be interesting to some people, maybe not to others. And I'm not sure whether a lot of people may recognize this name, but I have been for decades on and off, I've been studying Christian Science. And the founder of Christian Science is Mary Baker Eddy. And the theory about, I'm not sure if people are familiar with Christian Science, it's not Scientology, but essentially Mrs. Eddy was the founder in the 1800s, was the founder of Christian Science. And the basis is the Christian healing based on Jesus's numerous healings of the, you know, of ailments and, you know, casting out demons, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, she's had, her and her students have had actual demonstrations of healings throughout the years, decades, and they still do, her students still do. And it has been documented. So this is not just some hearsay, somebody talking about a story, been documented that she has actually raised people from the dead, just like Jesus did. And her secretary, his name was Calvin Fry, she raised him from the dead at least 5 times. And one incident, during one event that happened, he went down in her house in, I think, Massachusetts or New Hampshire, sometime to get pie, to eat pie after dinner or whatever. And some time passed and he didn't come back up. And when they went downstairs, he was, you know, on the floor in the pantry area on the floor, dead. And Mrs. Eddy raised him again, and they asked him, so what was your experience, you know, when you died? And he said he just remembers eating pie, and you know, that was it, and he doesn't remember anything else. It was as if like there was nothing else after that, but he just remembered going. He hadn't gotten to the pantry, so he was going into the pantry to get the pie to eat it, but he died before. And he said, you know, he remembers going into the pantry and eating the pie. So it's very interesting.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that, Afi. Good. Okay, so thank you all for sharing. So with death, you know, like you said, it is important to let go of past grudges and blocks, and to clean up stuff before you go. And you know, it's a good thing to do with everybody. I mean, there's this whole thing about reaching out your hand. For sometimes people get caught in their egos, and everybody has somebody in their life that they had some bad words with, and they don't want to talk to ever again, and they feel bad about it. My wife, and I had a story like this where my wife's brother had married a non-Jewish girl, and her family disowned her, and nobody would talk to him for like 20 years. And we were getting married. I didn't even know about this. And we were getting married, and you know, trying to figure out who to invite to the wedding. And she told me the story, and she was still stuck on like talking to her brother. And I said, well, this is absurd. You know, so we sent him one of these kind of singing plants. You know, you get a message, and you get a plant in the mail, and you get a recording, and it was, you know, it was from Bonnie, and then they talked, and then they got close again. And they were very close when they were young, and it resolved the stupid family karma that her mother was placing on the whole family. And you know, she got to spend. He was her. Well, we hadn't, you know, she hadn't talked to him for 20 years, and she found out he was very sick. He was on disability, and you know, we got to visit him a bunch and spend time with him, you know, during his, you know, final. It might have even been 20 years we got to spend with him before he passed. But you know, it was really nice. It's an example of just somehow we just have to clean up the stuff. So if you have any grudges or people that you regret and you're holding on to your ego about, like, well, they said that, and I'll never talk to them again. You know, just reach out. There's somebody who did that to me a long time ago, and he ended up at a party, and I just I think for years I've been wanting to kind of say something about to him, because I was very hurt, and he's a different person 20 years later, and he's and we got to be friends again. So it's we do have to let go, and we have to heal. Now, we were talking about suicide just a minute ago. Suicide, always have to do everything you can to discourage people. My spiritual teacher said it's like feeling cold and taking your coat off, but then there's no warm coat to put on. So, like, your physical body goes, but your emotional body is still in pain and suffering and anguish, but it doesn't have a physical body to work through the karma. So you always have to help people transform suicidal tendencies, because it is one of these more difficult things for a soul to go through, and it may take them a long time before they're able to find peace and get to a place where they can reincarnate. And so it's very important to always do your best to, and this stuff just happens out of nowhere and you can't do anything about it and you feel terrible. But, if you, just reaching out to people who are depressed and lonely, and the signs are often there if you know it, and just, really, especially people in your family, just making sure that you're there for them so they can come talk to you. So when people are passing, it's good to do a lot of meditation in their hospital room, or if they're at home passing, because they can feel the vastness of the vibrations in meditation in a very powerful way. It's kind of like a laser beam, so it can bring light to the departed. And even after people die, you can have meditations for people and direct the energy toward their passing, soul, which is often in transition for 2 or 3 days after they leave the body. So that's one way to kind of deal with people who have passed. It's important. People often do sometimes need to go to mediums. My experience, I lived in Sedona, and everybody was kind of a medium, and they say, oh, I channel Kuan Yin, and I channel Jesus and stuff like that, and their lives are always a mess. And you never know. You have to, if there are people who are very genuine who can channel very deep and high energies, but they're rarely few. So you have to kind of, it is good just to meditate for these people, and and pass on your bliss to them. And it's often thought that one of my spiritual teachers used to say, I think, and it's this story is about the Beatles. I think one of the Beatles managers was with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and the Beatles manager was in London, and he had died, and they were feeling very sad, and Maharishi told them to celebrate, because departed souls don't want to experience their grief. They're often happy and relieved and in bliss, and they don't want us to grieve. I mean, we can't help but grieving. We can't say stop grieving, because it's just there. It wells up. But on the other hand, we can, get it out quickly so you don't have to hold on to it for a while. Even in September, not a few months ago, I just had 5 people die in about 2 weeks, and some of them hit you more than others, but it was, so you have to get through it, otherwise it just you get immobilized. So cry it out, is the best way. So one of the questions is, does it matter how you die? No, it's not if you're killed in battle. You're liberated because you're in the present moment and not in fear and alert with courage and challenge. And that was kind of interesting, because we have all these wars and all these people tragically die on the battlefield, but they're kind of in their dharma. I mean, if they're in their dharma and they're supposed to be soldiers and they're supposed to fight for, a cause, and they're just kind of in the moment, because you just have to be totally in the moment when you're a soldier. It's thought that it can be a powerful thing. It's not as terrible, but sometimes when people die in accidents, it varies where they go, because, were they scared? Do they have a lot of basis in understanding what happens after death? Were they thinking of Ram like Gandhi was, or were they, they frightened? So it's difficult. You sometimes have to do more meditation for people who died tragically in accidents, because the awareness isn't there. It's just a shock, and you have to kind of support them in their transition. Okay, so now's the commentary on Katha Upanishad. There's many Upanishads. There's 10 primary Upanishads, and of the 10 major Upanishads, the Katha Upanishad is the one on the subject of death and exploring the ultimate about life. And this was the class that I took with my teacher in 2011. And so the story of this Upanishad is that there's this man Nachiketa, and his father dies, and he can't get over this, and he's a very kind of holy man, and so he prays to Lord Yama, the god of death, and Yama ultimately grants him 3 boons. And in the process of granting 3 boons, Yama reveals all these kind of beautiful things about death. So that's what this Upanishad is about, this dialogue between Yama and Nachiketa, and the grieving, and he and the grief that this man felt for his father. So the first boon that Yama gave to Nachiketa was, he was trying to let go of remorse about his, not being a good enough son. And so he asked Lord Yama to let my father receive me with love and not anger. And that happened for him. So Yama goes on in this dialogue to teach Nachiketa that death is compassionate and not cruel, and enhances life. And I think that's, it's very interesting, because Lord Yama rules Bharani Nakshatra, which is a Venus-connected nakshatra, right? It's always kind of a puzzle why Yama is connected to Bharani Nakshatra, I suppose. But to me, it also, and actually, Yama is not this ferocious Kali figure. Yama is, a great god, and but he also is, but his main lesson to Nachiketa is that death is compassionate and not cruel, and enhances life. And so the knowledge of death enhances us and makes us very rich. And that's my purpose in this whole lesson, is that if we understand death better, and the nature of it, then it should take away our fear. And that's the whole purpose of astrology and spiritual wisdom. There are all these stories of when HIV was first coming out, and people had this kind of death sentence with us. They interviewed all these people, and they started kind of treasuring every moment in the present, becoming so alive. And sometimes you meet these people that are given a death sentence, and they're given these wishes, the Make-A-Wish Foundation, or all these places, so they can kind of enjoy every moment. And I think this is kind of a beautiful lesson, is that we have to do that in our life before we get a death sentence, right? So just live every moment alive with joy. It's just kind of really a beautiful thing. Death, Lord Yama goes on to talk about how, pleasure defeats us, and prana gets, deletes our prana and gets us drained. And that's why, the 7th house, which is kind of connected to the sexual act, is, it's the Marika house, because it's also thought if you indulge so much in sex, then you're draining your prana, and then it eventually kind of, decreases your immune system. At least, of course, sex is wonderful, and it's for the creation of children. But we have a society that's obsessed with sex, and eventually does kind of deplete a lot of prana. But the whole point is that pleasure depletes us, and so sometimes it's thought that if we do we do more meditation, we have fewer breaths in meditation, we're extending our lives. Some people think we're given so many breaths in this lifetime, whatever, 8 trillion, how many breaths we get to live in a lifetime. And, if we use them up inappropriately, when we get anxious, we breathe quickly, or when we, have wild sex, I suppose we use up a lot of breath. But it's when we meditate and we do breath work, we have a way of, in increasing our longevity, because we're not using a prana, we're increasing our prana, and that increases bliss through meditation. Now, at the Lord Yama went on to explain. He said, at the time of death, we withdraw the senses. Each one's. So if you've been around dying people, the first sense that goes is touch, then taste, and then smell, and then sight, and then sound. So like people in a coma can still hear you, and because sound is the last, if they're alive, sound is the last of the senses to leave us. And I was talking to a dear friend of mine who was close to passing, and I called him, and we had this beautiful chat, and I really loved him very deeply. And he said he was having trouble hearing me, but he felt the love that I was expressing. It was like, and again, and then the next day he died. It was so amazing. But so again, sound is kind of the last thing to go. So sometimes burning incense and playing beautiful sacred music around somebody who's passing is very important. You want to lift the environment around them. So Yama teaches Nachiketa that before death, touch goes, and then taste and smell, and then only sight and sound remain active. People can hear in a coma because they respond to talking to them. And so expressing your love to people in a coma or people that are dying, they're going to get it, even though they're not conscious and they can't respond, they can't talk. Everybody says that is effective, and that's what the ancient Vedic texts tell us. So one of the things that he reveals in this Upanishad, that Yama reveals to Nachiketa, is that there are kind of 4 cravings or 4 blocks to that block us from moksha, and this is kind of telling, and these are all very hard to kind of deal with. So attachment to children is a big block, and you get parents and they raise their kids, and their kids kind of go to college and they don't talk. They don't talk to them anymore, and they hate their parents, and the kids have poured out all their love to their kids, and they have this it's just a horrendous thing. And so this whole and what happens is, if you die attached to your children, then you reincarnate in their family because you're so attached to them, and you kind of keep working out the karma. So it's important to, because Jupiter, this is kind of a Jupiter attachment, probably Rahu Jupiter or something, but I always tell people, we're a portal to bring our children into the world, but they have their own karma, and we get so attached that they have to be a certain way and that they behave a certain way, that we're spiritual, they have to be spiritual, or we're a doctor and they have to become a doctor. And we get so attached to our kids being a certain way. And Sri Sri calls this a sattvic attachment, because children are sattvic. I mean, children are just such a blessing, 5th house, 9th house. So but Jupiter, but it's so easy to get entangled in your kid that it blocks you from getting enlightened, because like, I'm not going to be happy unless my kids are happy, or I'm not going to be happy until my kid does this, or and it never happens because they have their own karma. So at some point, on the path to moksha, we have to release our attachment to our children, otherwise it blocks us. The second big attachment, he said, to moksha is money and wealth. You know, you get people who are always thinking in their mind, they're always counting dollars, they're always thinking how they can get more money, they only think about money, 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 money. We live in a very material society. Of course, money is necessary. It's nothing wrong with it. This Venus, of course, rules money. But so when you have attachment to money, you just never have any peace, because there's never enough, and there's always a need for more and more and more, and you can't take it with you, as that famous saying goes. And you have to kind of realize that, you know, it's there to give to others. In India, you know, the really smart, spiritual, wealthy people, they give all their money away before they die, even, because, you know, they've just, you know, it's creating really good karma for the future, and it's giving, you know, you're helping, when you donate to charities, you're helping other people live. So, you know, it's one of the secrets, you know, from the money karma courses is tithing and regularly giving money. And it's also a way of letting go the attachment of it. I mean, you know, Taurus has this big attachment to money. You know, it's the earth sign, it's Venus. It has trouble letting go, and particularly Taurus, and depending if you have Taurus owning the second house or Taurus being prominent in certain rotations of the chart, you have to kind of remember to keep giving and to tithe, and to not get attached in greed and more. It's a block. So the other big attachment to moksha is attachment to fame and reputation. You know, you remember those old American Express cards, and this famous person goes to Africa, nobody knows who they are, you know, and that was long ago, before we had the internet. I mean, people, you had these famous rock stars, and they would go to Africa, and no one would know them, you know. It's like, but so, you know, fame and reputation are very kind of fleeting anyway. And you know, we idolize all these famous people because they, you know, they're all over the TV, but I mean, they have no peace. I mean, think of, you know, when Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt got divorced, and, you know, they had paparazzi, you know, 24 hours, you know, trying to get pictures and get statements from them. And, you know, this is what happens with these famous people. You know, we think they have these glorious lives, but, you know, if you know, read about them, you know, they're often quite miserable, because, you know, the price of fame often comes with, you know, like not being left alone. So, you know, this is kind of a sun attachment. Like, you know, as sun obviously is fame and reputation, and 10th house. So you get Rahu there, Rahu in the 10th or something, Rahu connected to the sun. You know, you get politicians, they want to be in the center of attention, sun conjunct Rahu, and they, you know, what happens? Yeah, they get continual media attention, and they also get continual media blasting. I mean, look at Donald. I mean, poor guy, sun conjunct Rahu in Taurus. You know, he's got, he obviously craves the attention. On another level, he's like, you know, look what it's done. You know, it just, I mean, could you imagine having that level of tirade going on against you all the time? Unbelievable. So the fourth attachment is the attachment to wanting an immortal body. And sometimes, you know, I mean, obviously we have to take care of our body. It's our vehicle. You know, and at age 70, Nasargika Dasha, Saturn kicks in for everybody, and the body wears down and things start breaking, and you know, we're getting ready to be recycled to the next body, and trying to hold on to the body, you know, is kind of an attachment, because, you know, certainly you want to take care of it. I even wonder nowadays, you know, our medical science has gotten so advanced that, you know, people who might have died 5 years ago are kept alive in these kind of vegetative states, you know, sometimes on these medications and, you know, deep trauma, because, you know, science has advanced them. I don't know. I mean, I probably, if I thought about it, I'd have a living will to kind of pull the plug, or, you know, but I do sense that, you know, and there are groups of people that, you know, try to find the fountain of youth, and they're going to do all these advanced massage programs to become immortal and things like that. But, you know, again, it's just holding on to something that naturally decays, and you have to let go. So when you have, I think, I don't know, look look at if you have Rahu connected to the 5th house or aspect in the 5th house, attachment to children, Rahu connected to the 2nd house, or Venus, attachment to money and wealth, Rahu connected to the Sun or the 10th house, attachment to fame and reputation, Rahu connected to Saturn or the 1st house, you know, or the ascendant lord would be kind of attachment to the body kind of thing. Okay, any questions or sharing?
Again, I have a question. So like Rahu connected, so like Rahu's in a sign of like Saturn or Venus and aspect, like direct aspect. Like for example, my Rahu is like with Moon in the 6th house in Capricorn. So how it would affect?
Yeah, well, Moon. Yeah, I mean, what are your attachments? I mean, I tried to translate this astrologically for you because you're in astrology class, but I haven't done a definitive study on it. I mean, it's just something that makes sense to me. The Rahu is always kind of craving an attachment, but that could show up in other ways,
Yeah, like I guess like a couple of things, like I was close to death, like before like I had my child later in life. So before like he was born, I had a number of moments when I could have died, and I was kind of I was okay with that. But yeah, when he was born and when I got cancer, at that time I got attached like because of the child. So like I guess like now I can see that like attachment to the body and to the child.
Right. So it's just something to be aware. I mean, we all have cravings and we all have attachments, and we all have Rahu hitting someplace in the chart, and ultimately we have to kind of be aware of those and let them go, because they do block moksha. I have Rahu in the 2nd house, and I've always been kind of craving money. I became a financial astrologer for that, and I've had all kinds, Rahu in the 2nd creates all kinds of ups and downs with money. And it's still, I've got to learn the lesson about, you can't take it with you. And I just always remember to donate to charity every week, because it's an important part of why we're here, and not to what are we going to do with all this money anyway? I mean, it's here to help people. If you've been given a lot of money, you're there to help others. I mean, people who are super wealthy and are trying to take away the money of others, I mean, that's really difficult karma to go through. People, and you meet wealthy philanthropists. We have a history with Carnegie and Nobel and all these people who set up foundations to make their money continually help others, and it's a really wonderful thing to do. I always wanted to be a philanthropist so that I could do that, but you can do it on a small level too.
Yeah, we have a nonprofit organization, and we do free food programs internationally, like, so we do that.
Yeah, that's always very important. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to help others. If we have something, we're here to give. So it's always important. Okay. So we talked about fear of death already. We talked about, I told you the story about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So that was wonderful. So I think even during this conference on death that I went to, he said, it's often thought of that when we die, we meet our guru, our mother, and our ancestors, and they all come to greet us on the other side for a reunion in love. And I thought that was kind of quaint. I mean, people always kind of fantasize about that. And he said it's true. So I thought that's kind of people that you have lost obviously come back to you, when you pass. And so if there is that loss of love still, love is never lost. So there is the reunion that will come. So the divine splits into many forms, but then returns back to the oneness of the divine. So that's what it's all about. So there's a difference.
What happens? Well, that's kind of an interesting concept, but if the concept of reincarnation, what happens if by the time you die, some of the loved ones have been reincarnated, so you like miss each other? That's
I've never heard anybody talk about that. I kind of think people are just kind of, you know, it's all kind of Maya and illusion on some level at that level. So I think the creator can play whatever movies he wants. You know, that's my personal theory. I don't know. I do wonder, like, I think, okay, you know, there are some people that I still think about. One of my dearest friends who was almost a sister, she really was close enough that she was like my sister, suddenly died of cancer. I mean, just out of nowhere. It wasn't. It was she just. And her husband was so grieved he didn't even call me for 2 weeks. And I still, you know, 13 years later, I still think of her. And I'm sure she reincarnated quickly, but I'm sure I'll see her. You know, the thing I always tell people is that when people die, you know, energy is never destroyed. So their physical body is gone, but their soul body, you know, all their other subtle bodies are still there. And, you know, if you communicate with them or feel them, they're there. I mean, you know, when I think of my mother, I can connect with her. You know, I don't know where she is now. I mean, specifically, but you know, she's there. It's not, and it's very real. And even when I think of some of these dear friends who have passed, I feel like I can connect with them because the energy is never destroyed. So I think it's a mystery anyway. but it is quite interesting.
The reason I ask you this, the reason I ask
Excuse me, but
Jasmine, did you have some knowledge that would help?
I hear the same actually, that we will be greeted once we pass, actually. Once we pass from this world and go to the realm of souls, we will be greeted, and only with thoughts, not with the body. The body, actually, the soul might be showing the last body that they had because that is where the memory is related. But yeah, we will be greeted and we will recognize our ancestors and the loved ones.
Okay, that's a beautiful way of thinking about it. Yeah, my sense is that no, it's not like, you know, on the subtle level, you know, it's very different. I know, you know, when people are passing, multiple friends have experiences of being greeted with them, or that they entered the room, or they felt their presence, or they even had a conversation with them in their dreams. My friend Daniel passed just a couple months ago, and at the funeral on Zoom, you know, everybody was sharing, you know, people were sharing that they had that experience, and I did also. So, you know, you know, on that level, people can be multiple places at one time. You know, on the physical level, they can't. You know, but it's a good question.
And just
Mary,
Yeah, go ahead.
may
Yes, please.
but when my mother has passed away and my father, and I've gotten a very interesting message from my mother, and she tells me that she's on a different level of heaven or spiritual level, which I'm sure many of you in different spiritual practices know there's like 7 levels of heaven. Some people believe that, but my mother specifically told me that she's on a different level than my father, that they're not together. And she was very devout in her religious practices, and my father was not. So I thought I'd mention that to you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There are different, you know, I mean, this whole idea of hells, I mean, you know, there's no, like, you know, the quote unquote, the hell that people kind of imagine where you're roasted on a spitfire, of course, doesn't exist. But I have read a number of esoteric books, you know, where, you know, depending on the life that you've lived and the patterns that you have, you may reincarnate in a specific loca or location, you know, that helps you keep working on those patterns. I mean, people who are addicts, I mean, you know, they may actually, you know, reincarnate in a place, you know, where they can keep working on those issues, you know. So I think that's really kind of interesting. I've read that. Yeah, go ahead.
Natalia, I just there's one very interesting point which is stated in Vedic tradition that if you really very deeply practice relationships with God and your bhakti, your devotion, and when you are leaving this world and you're getting to liberation, then you can liberate at least 10 generations of ancestors and descendants also. So
Yeah,
if we practice seriously.
I have heard that. I mean, it's actually thought, I think one of my gurus had said that too, that if you do reach enlightenment in this lifetime, in this body, which is what you ideally want, then 7 generations of your ancestors are liberated also. Because people are like tuning forks, you know, ancestral karma is quite fascinating, but we are all connected. And so if one tuning fork starts vibrating in its purest form, it can you know that phenomenon when if you have an A tuning fork and you get it to vibrate, and you have another A tuning fork that's not vibrating, the other A tuning fork will start vibrating, you know. So it's kind of like we're these tuning forks that, you know, if our vibrations get to their purest level, then we can help liberate other souls in our ancestry. You know.
Yeah, I
That's
think it's also because like for us to practice, like I was thinking about me, like my life was like very deeply into spiritual life, but through what my ancestors had to go to give me life, so like they deserve it. So like I'm able to do what I'm able to do because of their work. So we're all connected in that way too.
Right. There's this whole holiday in the Vedic tradition called Shraddha that's 2 hours, 2 weeks before, was it the new moon, and usually in September or October, you know, when the 9 days to Mother Divine start, and it's a time to honor the ancestors. And it's very important in all traditions. All traditions do that because they influence us. In my Varga class on ancestral, we have 3 or 4 lessons on ancestral karma, and I bring up all that stuff because it's all so important if you're studying ancestral karma in the Varga charts, like the D30 and the D40 and the D45, particularly you know, and the D12. You know, you really have to kind of understand what's going on with ancestral karma and you know how it's working and why we're still connected to the people that, you know, that are dead. You know.
That's correct. Actually, there are 3, and that is the most important one. Also, Parashara mentions 12 from Karakamsha. You can see which loka you're gonna go after this life, and wherever loka that you go, if it's any higher, it's just a grace, nothing else.
Okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, I always use the 12 from the Karakamsha Lagna for the deity that we should be worshiping, but yeah, the loka would be there also. Very nice. Okay, so let's keep going. So sometimes people get confused. We think somehow we can will our way into enlightenment, you know, because we think in the physical body, you know, if we do something, we can, you know, it's going to make a difference. You know, if we're winning a race, we have to kind of practice and we have to keep running, and then we kind of will our physical body to become stronger and to win the race. But that's effort, and that's what happens with the physical body. The secret with consciousness is effortlessness. You know, secret of meditation is effortlessness. The mind grows through rest, meditation, breathing, contemplation. We create an unlimited, unbounded self through letting go, through effortlessness, and not through like trying, like we would do in a race in the physical body. So it's like the senses are designed to go outward, but only the yogi will be brave enough to turn inward to find God within. So, you know, this whole courage of being a yogi is like, you know, it's very scary sometimes to meditate. We have all these experiences of like St. John the Cross, who they have this dark night of the souls, you know, when he was going through these mystical experiences and ultimately got to God. But sometimes the process can be very scary because it's that inward turn, you know. That's why you need a spiritual teacher and guide to kind of take you there. There's this beautiful quote that I wrote down. the love that never, we seek love that never ends and pleasure that never ends, but these are illusions. People want soulmates and they want, endless sex and, favorite Arab. Again, I'm not, I'm not saying this prejudicially, but there's this fantasy, that of the terrorists that they're going to, have harems and have unlimited alcohol when they go to heaven, that kind of thing. That's the illusion of pleasure that they're seeking in the afterworld. And I don't think that's true of anybody. I don't know if that's true in traditional life, but that's that's the illusion that's kind of taught now. But in the end, it's like this beautiful quote: like a lotus shedding droplets of water, live with a smile in this miserable world, unattached to things around us. Those who run away from the world have no joy, and those lost in the world have no joy. I just love that quote, because it's, let me read it again. Like a lotus leaf shedding droplets of water, live with a smile in this miserable world, unattached to things around us. Those who run away from the world have no joy, and those lost in the world have no joy. Now you get people who try to leave the world and go to the monastery because they can't deal with the world. And sometimes often you meet people at the monasteries, they're not very happy because they've run away from the world. They're still kind of miserable in their pain and depression. And then you find people who are in the world and they're also, very, very lost. So the key is to be unattached to what happens around us. That's why I'm always letting you know. I mean, this is, just what I've learned. It's just like, people get so attached to their political views and this one's right and that one's right, but it's such attachment, people are killing each other now because, of this, and it's such Maya. I mean, everybody is a human being, yes, we have to be, not so caught up in these, these beliefs that we start, violating natural law. And, I kept thinking, it was interesting, all last year, I kept thinking with Ketu and Sagittarius, we were going to have all this religious fervor, and we'd have a lot more terrorism happening. And some of it, it's true, but it's not on the level like it was in 2001 when we had Ketu and Sagittarius. It's kind of like, Sagittarius is also the sign of beliefs, right? So this Ketu Rahu on the belief axis is just kind of kindling so much kind of like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to kill you, you're wrong. It's getting really kind of intense. And I'm hoping if when Ketu gets out of Sagittarius that maybe some of that energy will die down, but it does worry me. We won't have anything in Sagittarius finally next year. Jupiter will go out of there, Saturn's out of there, Pluto's out of there, and Ketu will be out of there. So maybe we'll have some peace. I don't know. What do you think?
Not in tropical.
What?
Not in tropical.
Not in tropical, right?
Yeah. And that normally impacts as well. Like you see all that happening all over again and everything.
Yeah, I think tropical. I have a lot of Western astrology in my background, and I do appreciate tropical. So thank you for reminding us that. Yeah, I don't think next year is going to. I don't think things are going to magically going to go away next year. Not because Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto are in Capricorn, and I just think it's really and we don't get Saturn out of Capricorn until what, May 2022, I think. So we've got a while to go. Secrets at the time of death. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So the soul is the size of the first segment of the thumb. So you have these thumb drives. Well, your thumb is kind of contains, a thumb drive can contain 64 kilobytes or something. Well, your soul thumb bite, your soul thumb bite can contain your whole life and your whole history and your whole ancestral karma and everything. And it's interesting, it can exit in 4 ways. It can exit through the anus, which happens with low souls with no merit. And you think of people, you know, in these TV shows, they're about to be killed, and you know, there's a gun up to their head and they're shot, and then the moment before they die, they're, you know, excreting and they're, you know, peeing in their pants and things like that. And to me, that's kind of, I mean, that's the type of life that they had. And then through the mouth or eyes with the yogi, so the soul can exit through the mouth or the eyes. And with yogis, it exits through the top of the head. And I was just reading today too that even some yogi souls, you know, seem to kind of impossible, actually die standing up to make sure that connection to exiting through the top of their head is happening. And I don't know how that's possible, but I suppose it is. I suppose you could lean against a tree or something. But I thought that was kind of fascinating. And then there's a small balloon that is released that exists in a collapsed form until it expands into another body. Nothing's ever erased. So one of the keys to the secrets of death is to drop cravings and aversion after age 50 so that we don't carry that impressions into death and are reborn with them. You know, I think our attitude has to be, doesn't matter, I need nothing, I am nothing, I fear nothing, I have no judgment. You know, this is like, you know, living this is like a lifelong experience, you know, and it only happens through lots of meditation and retreats. And I mean, and you know, I'm not there yet, but you know, it's you know, the ultimate is, you know, dropping your cravings, you know, and you know, one of my mantras is always, doesn't matter. I mean, something bizarre happens, and if somebody, you know, especially if you turn on the news these days and they're trying to get you all gripped and glued to staying on and, you know, on the TV and stuff like that. But you know, it's all Maya, you know, and it, you know, of course it matters. We don't want to see suffering in the world. But, you know, the world has its karma, and people have their karma, groups have their karma, the United States has their karma, China has their karma, and you know, if we think we're big enough that we can change the world's karma or a country's karma, yes, it does happen periodically, you know. We saw in the American Revolution, the Russian Revolution, you know, there are groups of people that obviously changed the history of mankind, but you know, I don't know if we're at that point in our history, and it's a little scary if we are. But at some point, you know, we also just have to kind of, you know, anytime we get gripped by something, you know, we keep talking about it, we're attached to it, they did this, they did that, you know, we're hanging on to something. And, you know, it's so hard to sometimes learn to let go, earth signs particularly, you know, because they hold on so much. But to remember that, you know, and you know, you have to kind of have this mantra, does it really matter? You know, and it's not to be indifferent and not care about the world or its suffering, but it's like, can you get unattached to, and you don't want to be like a mood making unattached. You can't do this on the level of mood making, but you sometimes you have a choice. Do I take the bait and I get gripped by CNN telling me about all this stuff, or do I kind of like, okay, the world's crazy, doesn't matter. I know I have a wonderful family. I'm going to keep studying the Vedas. I'm going to help people. You know, I tell people they get so kind of politically and passionately, you know, involved in things, and you know, I say, well, either volunteer locally, you know, and make a difference in your community by creating volunteer service work, or you know, you think you're going to make a difference by, you know, writing your politician who's bought out by some big corporate office, or that if you're going to protest in the streets, you know, and you know, for 10 years that the people who are corrupt are going to leave. I don't know. I'm a little bit like cynical. I mean, I think we care about our country, but I think we can make a difference on a local level. So I think it's important, you know, this whole thing, I need nothing, I am nothing. One of my gurus told my wife this because she was really into buying stuff. You know, you get Venus loves to buy things, right? Libra and Taurus, and depending on where you have Venus and Libra and Taurus in your chart. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with the shopping addiction, but you know, now at age 72, you know, we have all this stuff, and you know, and then you suddenly leave, you know, and then your family has to deal with it. You know, it's like, you know, but it's just sometimes people are just caught up in this continual craving of like, I'll be happy when I have another dress and I have another painting and I have another this or that or other, and it's, you know, you can't take it with you, of course, but you know, it's not that you should deny those things. And when you need something, you know, you're given it, and you know, it's okay to have those desires, but you know, people get obsessed about it. I mean, I'm you know, I'm still trying to, you know, I can't tell my wife anything, but you know, I can't believe she still buys things that she doesn't need, you know, at age 72. I mean, we're not, you know, let's donate the money to somebody. Let's, you know, but so you have to kind of, these things that I'm saying, they're not mood making, and they're not, you know, I'm just telling you in kind of on a deeper level, you know, and this whole thing, I am nothing. Well, you know, we start in life wanting to become a somebody. You know, we go to school, we want to be recognized, and you know, by our boss. You know, we want to become a somebody. You know, and that's ego, and the ego gets attached, and then we lose our job, and you know, we go through this kind of process of letting go, and you know, but ultimately, you know, as we get older, we have to completely let go. You know, I am nothing. You know, the idea of starting, you know, we have to go from being a somebody to a nobody, and in that letting go of ego, we have a chance to get liberated. So the process of going from somebodyness to nobodyness is very powerful. I fear nothing. You know, it's you know, that's a really hard one, because we have all these kind of primal, you know, the primal mind, you know, just is taught to do that. And we need fear to protect ourselves, but you know, our lifespan is written in stone, and you know, people, you know, they call me and they're afraid they're going to die, or their friend's going to die, and then sometimes it's just Maya, you know, but you know, learning to become fearless is just kind of a huge thing. You have to call on Hanuman. You have to. But it's very important, because you know, you know, the biggest fear, of course, is death. But you know, and a painful death or something like that. But you know, if you know your own eternity, then you have nothing to fear. It's just release. You know, we fear suffering, of course, too. But you know, in the end, we just have to kind of, you know, live on a deeper level. Having no judgment. Now, this is like really difficult, right? Because you know, we all think this is good and this is bad, and this political party is good and that political party is bad, and this religion's good and that party's bad. You know, it all ends up being like, you know, it gets us all crazy, and we've got a crazy planet at the moment. You know, it just is, you know. There are always, you know, since time immemorial, people have different political opinions. I mean, you know, is there one right way ever? There's something good about everybody, you know, about everything. You know, you have to kind of just get to this point of it just is. It's not about like, this is right and this is wrong. You know, when we start, of course, there are, you know, ethical situations that are true, but you know, judgments gets us into so much trouble, you know. So it doesn't matter. I need nothing. I am nothing. I fear nothing. You know, it's so they're okay. I'm okay. You know, these are simple mantras, you know, and you have to kind of live them and learn them to catch yourself. Otherwise, and it's a lifelong process. But you know, in the end, if you don't, then you get attached and later in life, and you come back to be reborn, to live out these things that, you know, I want more. I didn't buy enough things. Next lifetime I'm gonna have even more money so I can buy more things. You know, and you perpetuate that. You know, just later in life you have to kind of let go, let go, let go, and let God. Any sharing? Yeah.
I want to share with that attitude that you have. My guru, he doesn't like to be called guru, but he's a Swami, he's a Vedantic Swami, and been his disciple forever. He says this, he says he doesn't want followers, he doesn't give mantras, but the only mantra he gives, like a few mantras, one is like, nowhere, nothing to do, nowhere to go. He said, if you live like that, nothing to do, nowhere to go, and just go with the flow, be happy. Those are the two things he says. So that when you have that attitude, then you can't but live in the present moment.
I love it. I love it. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I thought I'd share. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have to add that to the slideshow. What is it again?
It is nothing to do, nowhere to go. Yeah, just be happy. Yeah, in the moment.
You know, it's a lifelong process to learn to cultivate this. You can only do it through meditation, but it does take a little bit of discipline with the mind. Oh, there I go again, you know? So that's,
It is. And, you know, it's like the Jivan Mukta, or I follow Vedanta and practices.
yeah,
And
me
the
too.
Jivan Mukta, or like the liberated soul, you don't have to wait to die to be liberated. Liberation is right here and right now. And how is that possible? It's like everything you've written here on this slide, in addition to, you know, that's it. This is all I have, this moment. And if I can get out of my mind, I'm a Jivan Mukta.
Right, right. That's it. It's all in the mind. The mind gets caught up in cravings and aversions, Rahu and Ketu, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have to be aware of our Rahu cravings and, you know, Rahu aspects, you know, three other signs besides the one that it's in. And, you know, so there's lots of ways that Rahu kind of binds us into kind of things. And we have to kind of, astrology should free us from seeing these, help us see these things so that we can be free. It's very interesting. When I taught my Rahu and Ketu class, I really saw some parts of myself that I hadn't seen before, because Rahu is always so kind of hidden and subconscious. And it's really, you really have to do a lot of deep work to really see how Rahu's binding you, because it's you know, it's so sneaky. You know?
Back to Aparna's point about the Jiva Mukta.
Yeah.
So in Chandrakali Kalanadi, it says that 12 from Karakamsha is called Jiva Muktamsha, the Amsha of Jiva Mukta, which is really nice, where the soul loses all its desires and the guna.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I know it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see more material on that. I was always just taught that 12 from the Karakamsha and Navamsha was connected to the deity that would give you liberation, but
Ishtadevata, that is where the soul actually loses all the desires, and that is how. So it's guna and karma, and the guna is the desires of the soul. Unless you don't have any desires, then you can get liberated. That is why it's Ishtadevata, the deity that helps you helps you lose all those desires.
yeah, that's interesting, because you know, my Ishtadevata is Shiva, and for about 12 years I was doing Shiva Rudram almost every day, which was really, you know, is really intense, but it actually kind of, you know, is extremely purifying. But you know, also I almost didn't want to be in the world, but you know, I suppose it was good that I did it, but then I realized that, you know, my business wasn't working, and you know, money wasn't working, because I was just kind of, you know, sometimes you can get overbalanced in Shiva, but ultimately it would bring incredible bliss and meditation when I would do it. Yeah.
Right. Parashara says Shiva because Shiva is the liberator, right?
Right.
Shiva removes and it's over. But in the other paramparas, they say Vishnu, and Shiva helps you to realize Vishnu, and the Ishtadevata should be one of the forms of Vishnu. And that is a much better, because Vishnu is going to sustain the Dharma and everything.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Only in the last couple of years, I've been really in love with Vishnu Sahasranam. So I've been kind of, I've going to switch to Vishnu because, and it's really actually changed everything for me. It's very interesting.
It's Natalia, sorry, like in Vrindavan, it's amazing. Like Shiva, there is like 4 temples which are, and it's Gopeshwar Mahadev temples which are actually protecting divine leelas of Krishna. Very special. Like when you enter Vrindavan, this holy place where all the pastimes of Krishna happened, there are 4 temples, and Shiva is kind of guarding all that area of beautiful pastimes, divine pastimes, Krishna.
Wow.
I just wanted to mention also one thing as we were discussing about what's happening in the world right now, and as we're discussing what we could do and about Jivan Mukta also. So there is a saying that the Jivan Mukta is one who is in this world, but not of this world. So kind of he is not inside of the gunas, but more like more kind of above. And I think like what it's so amazing that you're doing this class, and today we are talking. I think with that we really help in the world because we bring that high energy. So when we bring the high energy, we also kind of sharing with the world of this high energy sattva gun. So like Jesus said, if you purify yourself, you can purify thousands. So basically Tamagun and Rajagun bring suffering, but when we are in sattva gun and we are coming higher, then we can help others.
It's true. It's true. All my spiritual teachers have encouraged like groups of meditation and because a small number of very pure people can make a difference on the world, and that's what we need to do. But even my lineage going back to Brahmananda Saraswati, it was thought that when he was in the forest meditating, in the 40s during World War II or something, he came out after the war was over or something like that. I mean, it was almost like he was all the animals in the forest, the lions and tigers or something, were at peace, or something. So there's some beautiful story about that. It was just kind of interesting, but just the power of a few saints sometimes, even certainly we think of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield, just taking sides but being unattached. He was with Arjuna, but he was like he was not of the world. He saw the Maya of the whole thing. But there are great saints now working hard behind the scenes to make sure we don't evolve into some craziness. So and your own spiritual practices and seva work and charity work are all can help and make a difference. Very beautiful. Okay. None of you guys hardly took my spiritual astrology class. You missed it. We had all kinds of fun stuff there. Okay. Affy took it, actually. Affy took it. I at some point I have to do like a 20-week one because we actually have to go into all the deities and all this. I keep wanting to kind of do a deeper class on that, but anyway, so much fun. Okay. Anybody else need to share? Okay, this is it. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah, this is Deanna.
Good.
I guess the audio wasn't working on my computer anyway. Yeah, thank you so much for this class and for everyone sharing. We have such a very mature spiritual group here. I really, really appreciate all that. I just wanted to share that the timing is so interesting today with this class is that my partner of 15 years, his father died Friday.
Oh my.
And it was a very peaceful death. I feel there was a lot of grace, a blessing, and his wife was with him, and he took one last long breath and he left. And,
right.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been he's been ill for some time with a metastasized cancer. And it was amazing, you know, he proved the doctors wrong. They said he would be gone a year ago, or that he had 2 months. And so, but he was pretty amazing. He was more or less unperturbed and in the moment, you know, with the surrender that goes with, you know, losing a lot of your abilities to take care of yourself, or, you know, walk, or, you know, those kinds of things. But his mind was surprisingly unperturbed. He just accepted it. And, you know, he said, well, I'm still here.
Okay.
So anyway, I just wanted to.
That's beautiful, because like I said, there's some people who die miserably. Yeah, I think you have to kind of just remember to surrender. Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, it's very hard to surrender to, and you just have to do it. Okay. This is an interesting thing that was revealed in this Katha Upanishad, was one should not be too fond of pets in one's last days, as it can create too much attachment, as with the story of the deer. But you know, people, you know, I certainly, my wife and I both have, you know, are big dog people, and whenever we've had dogs pass, I mean, my wife grieves for about 3 months and things like that. So it is important, you know, it's like, you know, if you have pets, it's like your children. You have to kind of just probably make sure they're taken care of and they're in the will and things like that. And you have to let go of them too, because it's also, you know, it's a deep attachment, you know. So there's always these fond stories of the dogs running in heaven to kind of meet you, the dogs that died in your past life. I don't know. We always have these wonderful little things. Who knows how much of that's true, but I suppose it's true. I think I've heard stories like that.
Hey Barry, when you send us the PowerPoint, can you give us the scriptural reference as well? Like, you know, which Upanishad is this from or something?
I did that at the beginning. Did you see it? And I did send I sent the PowerPoint
okay.
A few days ago. I always send them early for you to read ahead. But this is all from Katha Upanishad.
Got it.
Yeah.
This story is from the Bhagavad Purana. And the story that's mentioned here, and the king's name is King Bharat.
Okay, so let's see, we've got a few more slides left. Let's see, we were talking about fear and death. Now, death fears the eternal soul. So, I mean, there's this conflict between death and the eternal soul. I mean, it's kind of like Maya, because, you know, there is no such thing as death, and there's no such thing as fear either, but they're very real when you're gripped by them. So we need meditation, we need knowledge, we need, you know, we need practices to you know, be able to let go of the fear so that we can latch onto the eternal self. And then there's no death and no fear. And that was really the whole purpose of doing this lesson, which is kind of a side issue. But, you know, I've somehow always been fascinated by death. I've got Mars and Barney, and it's my secondary chart lord, and I'm a Scorpio, so I've got Jupiter in the 8th house. So you can just see how, like, I've always been fascinated by death, and I'm always, you know, helping people with death counseling. So I mean, that's why this lesson also came about. If we fail to release Brahman in this life, we are again put into the body. So it's this, you know, it's something. This is a beautiful quote from the Katha Upanishads. There are 101 vital trails emanating from the heart. So I don't know if these are nadis or subtle body nadis. Only one goes up and the others lead to death. So if you unloosen the knots that strangle the heart, then we know pure immortal being in the self. You know, we do store so much in our heart, whether it's judgment, whether it's grief, whether it's, you know, resentment, which is the worst one. You know, we have to continually work on releasing these energies, you know, otherwise, you know, we can't get liberated. And so that's why it goes back to all those kind of key points about, and it's hard to live this knowledge. I mean, one of the most difficult people in my life suddenly just kind of a man who worked for me, 25 years ago, suddenly turned up in my life again, and I'm having trouble being compassionate to him. He had brain surgery last year, and he's a very difficult person, and I just can't bring myself to talk to him. And it's hard sometimes with the most difficult people in your life, but there's that famous story from Lord Buddha, and Lord Buddha had two devotees, and they were sent out into the village, with the job of kind of loving, and giving compassion to everybody. And after 3 months, they came back to see Lord Buddha, and and he said, "Well, how did you do?" He said, "Well, I did really well. There's only these two people that I just couldn't stand, and I couldn't deal with." And so Lord Buddha said, "Okay, now you have to go back and just work on those two people." So it's kind of, the people that are most difficult in our life are the ones that we have to learn to love and to forgive. And like, that's why I talked about stretching out your hand to people that you haven't talked to for 20 years that you're still holding a grudge about, and just making peace with everybody. Otherwise you carry it into the next life. It's you got to release all these knots. Now I'll end with a quote from Brahmananda Saraswati, who was part of my lineage. He passed away in 1952. He was the Shankaracharya of the North in India, and he was the man I was telling you about who would meditate in the forest, and all the animals would be in peace and things like that. But he said, "To get a human body is a rare thing. Make full use of it. There are 4 million kinds of lives which a soul can gather. After that, one gets a chance to be a human body. To get a human body, therefore, one should not waste the chance. If you don't value this, when you will be left with nothing in hand, and you will weep in the end. Because you are human, God has given you the power to think and decide good and bad. Therefore, you should never consider yourself a weak or fallen creature. Whatever may have happened up to now may be because you didn't know, but now be careful. After getting human, if you don't reach God, then you have sold a diamond for the price of spinach." Okay, so it's interesting that I know I was called to kind of have this lesson, but and I hope you enjoyed it. First and foremost, I'm a spiritual teacher. My spiritual teaching kind of comes into my astrology, and I was saying at the beginning that astrology can be 8th or 9th house, and we actually want to move our astrology to the 9th house, because we want our astrology to help liberate people from their karma, to release the knots and the bonds and the hidden patterns that are blocking them. And you're going to get clients who just say, when I'm going to get married, when I'm going to buy a house, and you have to help them. Those are legitimate desires. But our highest calling in astrology be to help people to find God and to become self-realized, and astrology can do that. I started doing this in my blind spots course, finding your blind spots. I did that. I might repeat that course next year. It's a nice class. It's really help us seeing all these deep unconscious patterns that kind of block us. But that's our whole purpose, I think, with my astrology work, and hopefully you're enjoying it. Okay, any final thoughts, questions, answers? I'm actually on time.
Natalia, again, you just shared very special thing, about how it's hard to talk to somebody, there is an issue and they're difficult people. And I'm practicing family constellation work also, and it's really amazing what helped us. I can just quickly share that the person, he's difficult when he did not grow much, when he did not have enough from his, generally from his upbringing. So when you visualize him and with his parents, ancestors, and God behind him, it's not only him, but all that lineage. And you can also pray for his resource to give him power, because a lot of people, when they don't get from their resource, they ask him from us. So we can help them by praying to their resource to give it to them, or just see them with their resource. And it helped us. That it's helped Mark.
I love that. I love that. I've done Hellinger work. It's very wonderful. I love that. That's very beautiful. I always, what I do is, like, one of the most difficult people that was in my life for about 10 years when I was in Arizona. And I just didn't know what to do with them. And I was, I was kind, and they were always kind of sniping at me and trying to pull me down and things like that. And their best friend told me, they said, well, their father was an alcoholic, and they beat him every day when he was 6, And then I just felt compassion for this person, and he actually turned out amazingly well, considering he was, abused by an alcoholic father when he was a kid. And ultimately, when you meet really difficult people, you're right, they have some awful history behind them, and we don't even know what it is. But ultimately, we have to dig deep and find compassion, because even if we don't know why the way they are, we must know something like that must have happened to them. And we kind of blame them, but they're sometimes just a product of some horrible family, like you say. Good.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Maybe we'll have to do a whole spiritual course, right? It's very funny. When I lived in the West, I put Jupiter in my 9th house, and I was only doing spiritual teaching, and then I moved back to the Midwest, and it's my natal chart, and I've got Jupiter in the 8th house, so I'm doing the astrology teaching now. But I have to get back to my spiritual teaching too. So that this is my chance. Okay, guys. So I did send the slideshow. I haven't made any revisions in it. I sent it Wednesday, maybe. Sometimes it's coming from Barry2 at appliedvedicastrology.com sometimes now. So look in your spam filters. And I always upload it to Dropbox too, so it'll be there. But I'm sorry if you didn't see it. Everybody else get it?
I haven't.
You haven't.
I
Well,
haven't.
Received it.
yeah.
Look in your spam folders. I'll load it up to Dropbox. It'll be there in Dropbox, okay?
And Barry, could you go over what the part 2 of this class is going to cover
Yeah.
quickly?
I think I wrote it down. It's on my website, but let me look it up real quickly. So I know the first 2 lessons were on Ayurvedic astrology, which we didn't really cover very much of, which was connecting Vata, Pitta, and Kapha to the signs and the planets, and how you can and the transits, and how you can diagnose a medical imbalance, because of the natal chart and the transits, and and things like that. I mean, some of you kind of figured that out. It's one of the reasons I kind of passed over it, because it's but it would be fun to go over it more deeply. So those are the first 2 lessons. We have 2 lessons on the D30 chart, which is kind of the mental body, the causal body, and how the causal body and our thought forms manifest into health problems. So usually you'll see things as seeds in the D30, and then they sprout into health problems, in the other charts. But you can sometimes nip them in the bud in the D30. There's a lot of case study work. I specifically going to try to focus on specific types of illnesses, like diagnosing cardio problems or cancer, or specific issues. We haven't really done a lot with that. And you should be able to look at people's charts and see tendencies that may be up. So we have a lot of casework to do in that class. And another lesson on mental health and connecting it to the 25th nakshatra. Most of those who studied nakshatras, the mind is really in the 25th nakshatra, and when that nakshatra is afflicted or has planets in it, or depending on what nakshatra it is. Like, you know, there's a difference between Pusha and Ashlesha for your 25th nakshatra. You have a certain mental tendency, and then so I know we're going to have a lesson on that. Did I forget anything? I have to go to my it's on my website, but I know it's hard to find anything on my website because it's so complicated. I'll send it to you again. The website now has if you go into the course tab, it now has a search button on top so that you can find a course. I'm just gonna go to it now because let's see if I forgot anything. I suspect, you know, I may add another lesson or two on longevity. I mean, longevity is such, you know, we could have 8 weeks on longevity, and I don't know what, I told you, I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to teach you a couple simple techniques, and hopefully you can kind of go from there. But it's the hardest thing in Vedic astrology, and you can't be casual about it. You know, you have to kind of go really deep with it, and I don't know what to do with it.
Very quick favor. Could you also create an event for your ISR date on Facebook so we could add it to our calendar so we don't miss it out?
You mean the ACFA?
Um,
You mean the conference in Sedona?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did put down the dates. I'll see if I can do that. It's just I'll keep telling you if you stay in contact with me. But originally I was supposed to speak on November 21st in the afternoon, and I don't know if Dennis is going to change that because now that the conference is virtual. I don't know if he's going to rearrange the schedule. I hope not. But I'm scheduled. If you want to just mark it down real quickly. I'm not as electronic as you guys are. November 21st. I was originally supposed to speak at 1 o'clock 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've been slow on doing YouTubes lately because I just haven't had time. Things are getting busier. It's amazing this class even happened. So Deanna, look on my website. I put the syllabus up under medical. I didn't call it medical astrology 2. I think I called it health, longevity, and part 2 or something. It's right on the sidebar. It's right on the sidebar. I'm seeing it here actually. It's right on the sidebar. And I'm just going to look at it real quickly to see if I missed anything. Like any subject is just endless in Vedic astrology, but I teach a lot of survey classes because I have another lesson on focus on health patterns and problems with Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, so a more specific lesson on that. And then I have a bunch of like immediate approaches to synthesis, doing a lot of case studies, and then a lot of case studies connected to sleep disorders, eating disorders, thyroid cancer, cardiovascular diabetes, parasites, and kidneys and gallstones. So anyway, just okay. So I was just trying to make it more practical. And you know, again, we're not doctors, so we can't play God and pretend that we're a doctor whenever we do this stuff. But what I do is if I see a problem, you know, I'll see Saturn in the 4th house or something afflicted, I'll say, how's your heart doing? What is your doctor saying about that? You know, and sometimes these problems don't sprout until their dashas sprout too. So it's very tricky, you know, how you have to deal with this. You know.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any final thoughts? Okay. So next week, the longevity slideshow. I have a feeling it's going to come the last minute again because I started it and it's kind of like it's a bear. So bear with me. We will do it. We will get something out of it next week. And that's our final class next week until part 2 starts in September. Okay, guys. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.